You stand beneath a sky that feels endless, though you know it has a shape, a dome of atmosphere, a mirror of invisible layers. Above it lies a true expanse, the quiet ocean of stars. For most of your life, that ocean has seemed still. The constellations rise and set in their ancient rhythm. The planets make their predictable arcs. Nothing seems to intrude. The universe appears serene, almost patient. But every so often, something crosses the quiet, a faint visitor from elsewhere. It begins as a whisper in the data. A small streak of light appears in an automated telescope image. A dot that shouldn't be there. Then another image, taken hours later, shows the same streak in a slightly different place. Astronomers call such things transients. Most are familiar: comets, asteroids, fragments of space rock orbiting our sun. But this one is different. Its trajectory, when plotted, doesn't close. It does not loop around the sun as everything else does. It comes from nowhere and goes toward nowhere. It is, mathematically speaking, unbound. You imagine it as a traveler with no home. A thin sliver of stone, cold and dark, crossing the void between stars of millions, perhaps billions of years. It has no orbit, no allegiance to the star, no warmth to keep it company. It simply drifts until chance and gravity bring it near another system, another light, another set of eyes. The scientists give a name: 3I/Atlas, the third known interstellar object discovered visiting our solar system. The Letter Standard telescope that found it, a robotic eye scanning the skies from Hawaii. ATLAS, the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, was built to warn of rocks that might one day collide with Earth. Yet on this day, it finds something not of our system, something that will never come close enough to harm or to stay. Its purpose, it seems, is only to remind. You picture the telescope itself, a dome of white metal on a volcanic mountain. Its mirrors turn upward to the thin, dry air. Beneath it, computers hum with quiet precision, gathering light. That light, when translated into data, becomes a line on a graph, a point on a map, a pixel on a screen. And somewhere in those pixels, someone notices motion that should not exist. The astronomer pauses, not because of fear, but because of wonder. There's a peculiar feeling that comes with seeing something from beyond the sun's domain. The distances between stars are so vast that even light, the fastest thing in existence, takes years to cross them. For matter, for anything with mass, the journey is almost impossible. Yet here it is, a shard from another story, cutting through ours. You imagine what that object has seen. Perhaps it was born near a distant star, torn loose by the gravitational tides of a forming planet. Perhaps it wandered through nebulae, clouds of gas and dust where new suns are born, watching creation from the outside. Over ages, it might have crossed the cold gulf between spiral arms of its galaxy, unseen by any eye until now. To it, your sun is merely another point of warmth in an otherwise dark eternity. And still, by some fragile geometry, it has arrived here, close enough for your species to notice. At first, astronomers call it a comet, because that is what its path suggests. They expect a tail, a shimmering stream of vapor that forms when sunlight warms a frozen surface. But the tail never comes. Its brightness remains steady, its light unsoftened by dust. In truth, no one knows what it is made of: ice, rock, metal, or something older than all three. Its motion is strange. Even the way it reflects sunlight seems inconsistent. Some nights it glimmers faintly, other nights not at all. It rolls, perhaps, or spins, as though undecided about which face to show. To measure it is to question the comfort of classification. Everything about it feels slightly wrong, slightly outside the laws that usually explain the heavens. You think about that feeling of watching something move where nothing should move. It's the same quiet awe that once filled early astronomers when they noticed the planets did not stay fixed among the stars. To see a pattern break is to sense the universe breathing differently. It means there are still things you do not understand. It means the story is not finished. Scientists publish their first analyses. They trace its path backward to the solar system, past Mars, past Jupiter, past the icy belt beyond Neptune. The equations, when extended, point toward the constellation of Serpens. But the further back they go, the less certain the direction becomes. Out there, between the stars, the concept of trajectory dissolves into probability. You can only say that it came from somewhere beyond, and that it will never return. When you think of it, a kind of tenderness arises. The object is not a threat, not even a guest. It asks for nothing. It simply passes through, like a traveler crossing a river, without leaving a ripple. Yet it leaves an emotional mark, a quiet trace in the minds of those who observe it. The knowledge that your solar system is not closed, not immune to visitors, shifts something deep inside. You feel both small and connected, as though the boundary between here and elsewhere has softened. For some, 3I/Atlas becomes a symbol of the limits of knowing, of the humility of observation. In an age of certainty and precision, it whispers that not all things fit within the models. It reminds you that the universe is still capable of surprise. For others, it ignites suspicion. Why were its earliest photos taken down? Why were some data files missing? But that is for another night's wondering. Tonight, what matters is the image of a tiny wanderer, moving across the cold with neither destination nor past. You imagine it now, far beyond the planets, already receding into the deep dark. Its speed is immense, faster than anything you could ever build, but from Earth, it looks motionless. The stars do not reveal motion easily. Still, the math says it is going, and the math does not lie. You picture that silent momentum, unstoppable, invisible. You imagine it passing near other unseen worlds, glancing off the edges of other suns, continuing its ancient drift. Perhaps there are countless such travelers, unbound objects that slip through systems unnoticed. Each one carries a fragment of its origin, a mineral composition, an isotope ratio, a story written in its atoms. If you could touch one, it would be like holding a page torn from another galaxy's book. But the universe does not give such gifts easily. It only lets you glimpse, infer, and wonder. You close your eyes and think of how far light must travel for you to even perceive such a thing. Every telescope is a time machine, showing not what is, but what was. Even 3I/Atlas, already gone, remains in your sky for a little while longer, a ghost of photons arriving late to your vision. You realize that to look outward is also to look backward. Every observation is nostalgia disguised as science. In that thought lies something soft, almost spiritual. You begin to see astronomy not as a hunt for answers, but as a meditation on impermanence. Every discovery passes. Every certainty fades. The universe expands, and with it, your understanding stretches and thins. Yet within that vastness, meaning still flickers. The simple act of looking up becomes an act of faith. The night around you grows darker. The stars sharpen. You think of the astronomer alone at the observatory, watching data scroll like a slow heartbeat on the screen. You think of the cold metal of the telescope, the hum of the computers, the faint hiss of the wind. Somewhere in that stillness, a new image forms, another streak, another visitor, another reminder that the cosmos is not empty. It only appears so between revelations. And as you stand in your quiet room, you feel that you, too, are part of this motion, a momentary observer in a universe of travelers. You and 3I/Atlas share something invisible, the condition of passing through. In the silence that follows, you wonder, not what was or where it came from, but how your species chooses to see, to name, to remember. And so begins the question that the next night will try to answer. How do your fragile eyes of glass truly see the sky? You stand before a telescope, a gleaming machine of glass, metal, and quiet precision. It does not blink, yet it sees farther than any living eye. Its mirrors curve and polish to impossible smoothness. Drink the faint light that falls from the heavens. You watch as that light enters, bounces, bends, and finally becomes a signal, a whisper made visible. What once crossed billions of kilometers of darkness now rests on a detector no larger than a coin. To look through a telescope is not to see, but to receive. You realize that your species has been learning how to receive for centuries. From the first lenses ground by trembling hands to the orbiting observatories that drift in silence above the atmosphere, every invention has been an extension of the same desire, to witness what lies beyond reach. You are the descendant of watchers, of those who could not bear not to know. The earliest telescopes were modest things, tubes of brass and glass turned toward the sky. They magnified the moon, revealing craters and shadows where once poets saw only a pale disk. Galileo, peering through his handmade instrument, saw moons orbiting Jupiter and realized that not all things circled Earth. That discovery was more than scientific. It was existential. It shifted the center of everything. You imagine him standing beneath the same stars you now see, his heart racing as the universe opened a little wider. Each new generation of telescope has been a mirror to human ambition. Some gaze from mountaintops, others float beyond the reach of air. On Mauna Kea, the white domes gleam like sleeping eyes against a volcanic stone. In Chile, the Atacama Desert holds arrays of dishes, each listening to radio waves that have traveled longer than civilization has existed. Above it all, the Hubble Space Telescope circles the planet, its golden mirrors collecting ancient light, transforming photons into pictures that become part of human memory. But these eyes of glass do not see as you do. The human eye is a creature of immediacy, sensitive to color, motion, and the brief. A telescope is an eye for patience. It gathers what the sky offers not in moments, but in hours, sometimes days. It waits as light accumulates, one photon at a time, until an image emerges. What you see through it is not the now, but the long ago, a time when the universe was younger, when galaxies were closer, when stars had just begun to bloom. To see through a telescope is to travel through time. Every ray of light carries history. The Andromeda galaxy you glimpse tonight sent its light when humans had not yet walked the earth. Even the glow of your sun takes minutes to arrive, which means that every sunrise is, in truth, a memory. You live in a universe of echoes, illuminated by the past. In the control rooms of observatories, the watchers wait in dim red light. Screens glow with graphs and coordinates. Outside, the wind whispers across the mountain, carrying the scent of stone and cold. The telescope moves with gentle precision, guided by motors quieter than breath. Inside its dome, the mirrors adjust by micrometers, chasing the faint signal of a star or a visitor passing between constellations. You can almost hear the rhythm of observation, the soft hum of cooling systems, the ticking of data logs, the slow intake of breath when the first image forms. To most, the pictures seem abstract, dots, streaks, and smudges. But to astronomers, they are stories. Each pixel holds a message written in the alphabet of light. Light, you learn, is more than brightness. It is information. Every wavelength tells something different. The temperature of a star, the minerals of a comet, the composition of a distant planet's atmosphere. Telescopes do not merely look, they decode. Through them, humanity learns to translate color into chemistry, shimmer into structure, starlight into story. Even software becomes part of this seeing. Algorithms clean the noise, enhance the faint, combine thousands of frames into clarity. The raw light from the sky is messy, scattered, interrupted, imperfect, but through calibration and patience, it becomes image and understanding. You think of how often this mirrors the mind, how your own thoughts, scattered and dim, require stillness to align. Seeing, whether with glass or with awareness, demands calm. The telescope, in its own way, meditates. It waits for darkness. It adjusts to the drift of the earth. It surrenders to the patience of the cosmos. There is a lesson in that, the art of waiting, of listening to what cannot be hurried. Every discovery begins with stillness. You begin to wonder about the boundaries of seeing. When you gaze at the stars with your naked eyes, the experience feels intimate, a dialogue between you and the universe. But when the image comes through machines, through layers of data and software, is it still seeing? Or is it something gentler, a kind of translation, a conversation carried by instruments you built to extend your senses? Perhaps you think this is what science truly is, an act of empathy with the cosmos. The telescope becomes the bridge between human curiosity and cosmic indifference. It takes what is immeasurable and makes it knowable, at least for a while. You recall the faint traveler from the previous night, 3IATLAS, gliding unbound through the solar system. The telescopes at first noticed it were doing what they always do, scanning, waiting, trusting the sky to reveal. And in that steady watching, a brief miracle occurred. The universe sent a stranger and someone noticed. Yet even as telescopes grow larger, sharper, and more intelligent, you realize that every image they take is also shaped by choice. Astronomers decide where to look, what to record, what to keep. The sky is infinite, but attention is finite. For every photograph that becomes famous, there are thousands that remain unseen, tucked into archives, forgotten by time. Seeing is not just about what is visible. It is also about what is ignored. You think of the phrase, eyes of glass, and feel its duality. Glass can clarify, but it can also distort. It magnifies beauty, but can fracture it into spectra. It reveals the stars, yet hides a hand that holds it. Perhaps, in learning to see the universe, humanity has also learned to see its own reflection, fragile, yearning, luminous. There is humility in knowing that even the best telescope cannot see all. The cosmos will always keep secrets, corners of darkness too deep, signals too faint, distances too vast for any mirror to capture. But that, you realize, is part of the wonder. If everything could be seen, the mystery would end. The search would lose its meaning. You look again at the silent dome atop its mountain. Clouds drip below it like slow rivers of mist. Inside, the telescope continues to gather light older than memory. Its lens glows faintly, alive with ancient stories. And in that moment, you feel gratitude, not just for what is seen, but for the immense, unseeable expanse that still remains. The universe is not something to be solved, you think. It is something to be witnessed. And to witness is to participate quietly in the act of creation, turning photons into understanding, light into meaning. Outside, dawn begins to touch the horizon. The telescope powers down, shutters closing like eyelids. The night's light has been captured, stored, and soon analyzed. You imagine those invisible photons resting now in the memory of machines, waiting to be interpreted by human minds. The watchers will sleep, and their instruments will dream in data. As you walk away, the mountain feels alive, humming with the night's harvest of starlight. Somewhere among that data lies a new pattern, perhaps even a trace of the traveler itself. You know it will take time, patience, and faith to find it. But all discovery begins here, with the act of seeing. You pause one last time before descending, gazing at the fading stars. The thought forms slowly, quietly. To truly understand what you've seen, you must now learn how movement itself writes meaning into the sky, the mathematics of motion waiting to be felt. You sit beneath a sky so vast that even silence feels mathematical. Each star seems placed with care, as if drawn by a steady, invisible hand. You sense that the universe, though it looks chaotic, is built from rhythm, arcs and ellipses, lines and loops, the quiet geometry of motion. Every object that drifts through space, from a grain of dust to a galaxy, follows some hidden curve. The night is not random. It is ruled by gravity's poetry. You think of the word orbit. It sounds circular, safe, complete. The Earth orbits the Sun. The Moon orbits the Earth. Electrons orbit atomic hearts. To orbit is to belong, to be held by a center. But the story of 3I/Atlas begins where belonging ends. Its path, when scientists first mapped it, refused to close. It entered the solar system not as a companion, but as a visitor with no intention of returning. At first, astronomers expected a curve they knew, a wide, stretched ellipse like that of a comet from the outer reaches of the Oort cloud. They fed its coordinates into equations that described celestial motion, Newton's and Kepler's enduring music. The results came back strange. The eccentricity of the orbit, a measure of how far it deviates from circular, was greater than 1. In simple terms, it wasn't an orbit at all. You imagine the diagram, a sharp, sweeping curve, like a stone skipping once across the surface of a pond before flying away forever. That curve has a name, a hyperbola. Unlike the comforting loops of planets, hyperbolas never meet themselves again. They open outward infinitely. Their arms reach toward eternity. In that single curve lies a quiet truth. Not everything that enters our sun's domain belongs to it. Some things come only to pass through. You close your eyes and picture the forces at play. The sun's gravity, immense, commanding, ancient, pulls on 3I/Atlas with all its might. But the visitor moves too swiftly, its momentum greater than the sun's pull. For a brief cosmic moment, the two are bound in a delicate dance, attraction and escape balance on the edge of possibility. Then, like a sigh, the visitor slips free. There is something deeply moving about this. You've been taught to see gravity as an anchor, a law that binds and steadies. But here, it becomes a gesture of release. The mathematics of motion allows for freedom as much as for captivity. You remember learning about Kepler's laws of planetary motion, how he found that planets sweep out equal areas in equal times, tracing ellipses with the sun at one focus. These patterns are not random but precise, the universe's way of writing in curves instead of words. Kepler saw harmony in motion, a cosmic order that echoed the structure of music. Every orbit, he thought, was a song. But when the path of 3I/Atlas appeared on his chronograph, it broke the melody. It sang in a different key, one that pointed not inward but outward. Its trajectory said, "I was never yours." You feel an odd tenderness for that. Perhaps you think motion without belonging is a kind of purity. It means there are still wanderers in the universe, still mysteries that refuse the comfort of circles. Astronomers studied its velocity, about 30 kilometers per second, faster than anything native to the system should move. They called this speed hyperbolic excess velocity. Even the phrase sounds poetic, as though the object carried too much energy, too much past, to ever be still. Where did that extra motion come from? A gravitational slingshot around another star? A collision in a distant system? Or was it simply the random inheritance of cosmic birth, a leftover spark of some ancient ejection? To answer such questions, scientists turn to the laws of mechanics, Newton's grand equations that connect mass, force, and motion. But even those elegant laws feel like metaphors when you think about them deeply. Gravity, after all, is not a string that ties objects together. It is the bending of space itself, a distortion of the invisible fabric you live in. When 3I/Atlas passed near the sun, it didn't feel a pull. It followed the curve of space-time, like a leaf carried on a river's bend. That river, in Einstein's view, flows endlessly. Objects with enough speed can cross its meanders and continue onward, never to return. This, too, is motion, but not orbit. It is migration. You imagine what it feels like to move through that geometry, to drift past worlds and stars, carried by invisible curves, unbound and eternal. You sense both loneliness and liberation in it. To be outside the sun's hold is to be free, but also to be forgotten. 3I/Atlas will travel for millions of years, unseen by any eye, until chance delivers it again into another system's light. The thought brings you to something deeper. How even the human world, so much follows unseen equations. You move around your own centers, loved ones, dreams, responsibilities. But sometimes, like 3I/Atlas, you find yourself moving along an open curve, leaving familiar gravity behind. You sense the parallel. The mathematics of motion is also the mathematics of emotion. Both describe attraction, balance, escape. Astronomers speak of energy when they speak of motion. Every orbit depends on it. A planet in a circular orbit has negative energy. It is bound. An object like 3I/Atlas is positive energy. It will not stay. The difference is small, yet it defines everything. You wonder if that's true for people too, that a tiny change in energy, a shift in intention or momentum, can alter an entire trajectory. You think again of the curve. It is not infinite chaos. It is structure. Hyperbolas, like ellipses, obey laws. Their shapes can be predicted precisely with a few parameters: speed, angle, distance. Even freedom, it seems, follows form. That realization comforts you. The universe allows for departure, but not disorder. Some astronomers try to simulate where 3I/Atlas might go next. Their models trace its future through interstellar space, its lines stretching outward from the solar system like a thin filament of light. They project its path against the star map, finding it will move toward the constellation of Virgo, a direction rich with galaxies. You imagine it passing by new suns, unseen civilizations, silent regions of dust and void. To you, its journey feels less like escape and more like continuation. The mathematics of motion, when understood, becomes almost spiritual. It shows that every movement, no matter how random it seems, arises from relationships, forces, distances, energies. Nothing truly moves alone. Even the most solitary traveler carries a memory of what it once circled. The sun's gravity, faint though it becomes, will always echo in the object's path, a whisper of influence across infinite distance. You find comfort in that too. That leaving does not mean severing. Every motion carries a trace of what moved it. The universe remembers, not through words, but through direction and speed. As you think of this, you recall the delicate curves of other cosmic visitors, Oumuamua, Borisov, and now 3I/Atlas. Each followed its own hyperbolic path. Each offered a momentary intersection with human awareness, then vanished again into silence. Yet their brief appearances changed how you see everything. They reminded you that your solar system is not a closed garden, but an open port in the galaxy's vast sea. Perhaps that is what mathematics really gives you, not certainty, but perspective. The equations describe reality, but they also describe relationship, mass and gravity, time and motion, belonging and release, all woven into one formula that the universe keeps writing quietly with every orbit and every escape. You picture again the curve of 3I/Atlas, a silver arc bending past the sun, gliding out toward forever. Somewhere along that invisible line lies both science and poetry, the proof that freedom, too, has geometry. You sit with that thought, letting it settle. Around you, the night feels patient. The stars no longer seem scattered but connected by invisible lines of force, as if the whole sky is one great equation waiting to be understood. And as the image fades, another question rises softly in its place. What happens when something that once was seen is quietly made to disappear? You sit before the faint glow of a monitor, the light soft against your face. Somewhere deep in the servers of NASA, far from the hum of human chatter, lie oceans of data, billions of files of sky and silence, each one a frozen heartbeat of light. Every photon that struck a telescope lens was translated, time-stamped, and stored. The universe became an archive of numbers. And among those numbers once lived the first traces of something strange. A blur of light, small but deliberate, appearing in the survey logs of Atlas, the asteroid terrestrial impact last alert system. At first, it was ordinary, a new moving object, cataloged and named with the calm precision of astronomers, 3I/Atlas. But then, weeks later, something shifted. The path, the brightness, the faint chemical fingerprint of its reflection, all began to suggest a story that didn't fit within the comfort of the known. And when some researchers went back to review the earliest frames, the ones that captured its first arrival, they found that the files were gone. Not erased, exactly, just missing. You breathe, slowly. In science, data loss happens all the time. Corrupted drives, outdated systems, human oversight. Yet, there's something haunting about an absence that arrives quietly. An image once seen and saved, now gone. Like a page torn from a book you didn't realize mattered until it was missing. The archive is not a single place. You remind yourself. It is a living organism, sprawling across continents and servers, breathing through cables and spinning disks. Petabytes of memory. And like all living things, it forgets. Sometimes the forgetting is intentional, a pruning to make room for more sky. Telescopes observe faster than humans can process. Millions of stars pour through their digital eyes each night. Not every pixel can stay. But sometimes, forgetting has another rhythm. You think of the early astronomers, the ones who charted stars on glass plates, tracing light by hand under red lamps. Some of those fragile plates, stored in drawers and basements, cracked or faded. Others were mislabeled or lost in moves. Yet even those absences taught something. A broken plate revealed how brittle our memory of the cosmos could be. You realize, every archive has its shadows. Every database has places where data falls through, unnoticed, like dust slipping between floorboards. The story of science is not only a story of discovery, it's also a story of what we fail to keep. And perhaps that is part of its strange beauty. You imagine the missing images, not as deleted files, but as ghosts in the system. Pixels that once translated light from a distant traveler, now gone to digital silence. What did they show? A faint smudge brighter than expected? A subtle flicker of motion that hinted at something artificial? No one can say. And so, the imagination fills the space where certainty ends. You scroll through archive reports and mirrored repositories. Some researchers captured copies, snippets of raw data preserved on personal drives. Others mention them only in passing. Initial frames unavailable for review. The tone is neutral, scientific, as it must be, but beneath the neutrality, you sense unease, the quiet tremor of curiosity constrained. Science, after all, lives on the edge of what could be verified. Without evidence, there can be no claim. Without the image, there is only rumor. Yet something about that silence keeps you awake. What if the missing data is not a flaw, but a signal, not in the sense of conspiracy, but of truth's deeper texture, that every discovery is paired with an echo of uncertainty? To lose something in the act of seeing may itself be part of the message. You lean back, eyes closed. The soft hum of the computer becomes the hum of the universe, a constant background of signals and noise. The data flows, erases, repeats. Somewhere, the light of 3IATLAS still travels through space, long past Earth's reach. The photons that once struck the telescope mirrors are now millions of kilometers away, still racing forward, carrying their quiet evidence to nowhere. In that endless flight, you sense a metaphor that the universe itself is an imperfect recorder. Stars explode, planets vanish, and galaxies fade into infrared whispers. Even light forgets where it began. Perhaps forgetting is not the opposite of knowing, but its companion. Perhaps what vanishes teaches as much as what remains. You think of how ancient astronomers once mapped the heavens by eye alone, their records hand-drawn, their stars imperfectly placed. Yet, from those incomplete maps, entire sciences grew. Imperfection did not stop discovery. It gave a direction. And now, in this age of precision, the same pattern repeats, but digitally. A few missing images, a few questions left unanswered, and curiosity blooms anew. What does it mean, you wonder, for an archive to forget in an age when nothing should be lost? Outside, the night deepens. Clouds drift across the real sky. An older archive still, one that has always stored its mysteries not in files but in distance. You feel the vastness of that distance and the humility it demands. Science is not an empire of answers. It is a cathedral of questions, built stone by stone on the edge of the unknown. And sometimes a stone goes missing. Yet the structure stands, changed, but whole in its imperfection. The visitor from nowhere continues its journey, unseen for now. And you, too, continue, tracing meaning not just in the data that remains, but in the silences between. In every absence, a whisper. In every missing frame, a possibility. You close your eyes, letting that thought rest in you. The strange peace of knowing that forgetting, too, has its place in the rhythm of discovery. Somewhere, far from the servers and telescopes, a faint light still moves through the dark, waiting for the next eyes to find it. And in the quiet that follows, a new question begins to form, a question about what else might have been hidden in that vanishing light. Light travels in silence. It crosses distances too vast for language, too empty for sound. Each photon, that smallest unit of light, begins its journey in a place it can never return to. Some are born in the heart of a star, in a pulse of fusion that lasts less than a thought. Others scatter from rock and ice, carrying whispers of what they touched. And one night, across billions of kilometers, a few of these photons touch a mirror on Earth, and the telescope opens its eye. You imagine the scene. The cold glass of Atlas's sensors glows faintly under the Hawaiian sky. The air is still, the world asleep, and yet light, the same light that left some unknown surface years ago, arrives and says, "I am here." Science listens. Each photon carries two messages: how far it has come and what kind of matter it is known. Its color tells the temperature of its origin. Its energy tells the story of distance and decay. Through filters and detectors, those messages become numbers, data columns of brightness, frequency, and time. But if you look beyond the numbers, you begin to sense something more human. Light is the memory of matter. It is how the universe remembers itself. The photons from 3I/Atlas, faint, scattered, half swallowed by noise, became more than data. They were letters from something unclaimed, a visitor whose past spoke not of orbit but of escape. You picture them like dust motes drifting in the dark, each one holding the reflection of a surface no one has seen. When the telescope captured them, it didn't just record an object. It recorded a moment when the universe brushed against awareness. You breathe slowly. The act of seeing feels sacred. Light is old, older than anything alive. Some of it began when the first atoms formed after the Big Bang, and has been traveling ever since. Faint and stretched, now part of what we call the cosmic microwave background. Those ancient photons fill every room, every breath, every corner of space, a quiet sea of origin around you. So when scientists speak of collecting light, it is never merely collection. It is communion. The ATLAS telescope, with its mirrored eyes and sensors tuned to the faintest flicker, becomes a vessel for those messengers. They arrive as streams, scattered to the atmosphere, their patterns distorted by air and wind. Yet even in their distortions they carry truth, like the way a voice heard through water still reveals its tone. To read light is to listen for its rhythm. Spectroscopy, the study of light's colors, breaks each photon apart, like a prism unraveling a secret. In those colors lie fingerprints, traces of carbon, oxygen, metals, water, ice. Through these, astronomers decipher what a thing is made of, and sometimes where it might have been born. The light of 3IATLAS held none of the easy signatures of familiarity. No steady cometary trail of simple volatiles, no regular pattern of reflection. Instead, it shimmered irregularly, suggesting a surface that rotated oddly, perhaps tumbling, perhaps shedding. You imagine it as an ancient shard, not a traveler with destination, but a wanderer from another star, thrown loose by a long-ago catastrophe. Each turn of its uneven body caught sunlight differently, sending flashes of information into the dark. For a few nights, those flashes reached Earth. The telescopes caught them, translated them, stored them in digital constellations. Scientists compared spectra, aligned graphs, whispered theories. Some saw signs of metallic glint, others of dusty organics. But beyond interpretation lies something quieter, the emotional weight of contact. You think of how strange it is that light can bridge loneliness, that what began in an alien sky can cross millions of years and arrive here, gentle and intact, that it can make you feel connected to something that will never know you exist. To touch light is to touch a memory not your own. The photons of 3I/Atlas, though few, cared enough to say, "I came from far beyond your sun." The trajectory confirmed it, not an ellipse, not bound by solar gravity, but an open curve, what scientists call hyperbolic, a word that, in mathematics, means escape. Light and gravity intertwine in their eternal dance, and yet sometimes one slips free. You picture the visitor's light spreading like a thread across the void, weaving through planetary orbits, brushing past Mars, then Earth. When those photons hit the telescope's mirror, they were caught for just a moment, a fraction of a second between infinite journeys. In that instant, they became both science and story. Because every act of observation is also an act of translation. You turn the light of the world into knowledge, into narrative, into belonging. And yet, not all light is meant to be fully understood. Some carries contradictions, like a melody whose last note is missing. Scientists try to reconstruct it, through models, through equations, but something always escapes. That escape is what keeps the night sky alive. Light reminds you that even what travels straight has a history of curves, bent by gravity, shaped by time, altered by everything it passes. It is never the same when it arrives. Perhaps that's true of understanding. 2. The photons of 3I/Atlas have long since passed. The telescope caught their last echoes before the visitor faded beyond range. But even now, their data remain, saved in spectral lines, in shared folders in memory, a kind of digital afterglow. You imagine those numbers as tiny lanterns flickering on your screen, each one a translation of a moment of contact, each one proof that light, however brief, leaves a trace. And perhaps this is what science really is, a way to listen for light long after it's gone. Because in a universe where everything moves away from everything else, Light is the only language that never stops speaking. It tells you of stars being born, of worlds colliding, of travelers that no longer belong to any system. It tells you that you, too, are made of light slowed down, matter condensed from the same radiation that first filled the void. You breathe out, letting that thought settle in your chest. To follow light is to follow the story of all things that leave and never return. Somewhere in the archived wavelengths of 3I/Atlas, the pattern of its light still waits, not as a complete message, but as an open question. Was it only rock and ice, or something older than the elements themselves? Was it the first of many or the last of its kind? You don't know, and perhaps you never will. But as you imagine those fading photons disappearing into the outer dark, you sense that their journey is not over. For even in absence, light continues, bending, reflecting, transforming, whispering to the long corridors of space. And from that whisper, a new thought begins to form, one that asks not what the light carried, but who was listening. The story drifts onward, toward the next reflection, toward the minds who search for patterns in the faintest noise. You sit in the darkened room where the monitors glow like soft moons. The hum of machines surrounds you, steady and low. Somewhere deep in their circuits, millions of numbers turn in a line. Photons translated into certainty. Science, at its heart, is an agreement with the universe, that what we measure is real and what we calculate can be trusted. But trust, you realize, is fragile. Every equation, every orbit, every plotted trajectory rests on the assumption that what is seen has meaning, that the instruments tell the truth. Yet behind every truth lies the quiet possibility of error, a miscalibrated lens, a line of corrupted code, a moment of inattention. To be a scientist is to live between faith and doubt, between what can be verified and what must be believed long enough to test. Astronomy, especially, depends on this delicate balance. You never touch the stars. You never hear them. You see their light, filtered and bent by distance, by atmosphere, by time. You trust that the light means what you think it means. And when that light hints at something extraordinary, as it did with 3I/Atlas, the mind must stretch itself between skepticism and wonder. You imagine the researchers hunched over screens in dim labs. Someone frowns at the plot of his motion. Another recalculates, then recalculates again. The path refuses to fit expectation. Too fast, too free. Its shape, a curve open to infinity. They check the instruments. They check each other's work. They wait for confirmation from telescopes across oceans. Slowly, confidence builds, not from certainty, but from repetition. Science, you realize, is not built on single-axis seeing. It is built on shared seeing. When one telescope speaks, others listen. When a pattern appears in separate data, trust deepens. The individual becomes part of a collective act of faith. Faith not in belief, but in process. It's strange how this mirrors older ways of knowing. Ancient sky watchers once stood on mountaintops, marking stars with stone and memory. Their tools were simple, but their faith was the same, that the heavens could be known, that patterns were not illusions. Even now, with silicon and satellites, the gesture remains, heads lifted toward the unknown, hearts balancing reason with awe. You think of faith not as religion, but as a rhythm. It pulses through science quietly, like a heartbeat behind logic. To trust your instruments, your colleagues, your equations, that, too, is a kind of devotion, because the universe never answers directly. It speaks in traces and hints. It allows itself to be known only through patience. And patience, you've learned, is another word for faith. When the first images of 3I/Atlas vanished from NASA's archive, it wasn't just data that disappeared. It was trust that dimmed. How can something so vast, so carefully cataloged, simply fade away? The question spread through online forums, quiet research threads, whispered conferences. Some suspected a simple glitch. Others felt a deeper unease. Scientists are not immune to the pull of mystery. The line between inquiry and imagination is thin, especially when the evidence fades. But even then, something held them steady, the same trust that guided every night of observation. They believed not in perfection, but in persistence. Lost data could be found. Missing information could be inferred. You find this beautiful, the humility of it, the willingness to keep searching, even when the sky refuses to explain itself. Faith, in this sense, is not blind. It is open-eyed, aware of its limits, yet reaching anyway. You recall a story once told by an astronomer. Every observation is a promise between light and understanding. The light keeps its side faithfully. It travels, it arrives. The understanding, though, takes longer. And that's where you stand now, between the arrival of light and the arrival of meaning. The faith of science is not that every mystery will be solved, but that it is worth looking even when answers are uncertain. You lean back and imagine the visitor itself. 3IATLAS, drifting somewhere far beyond Jupiter now, cold and untouched. It doesn't care what names you give it, what numbers you fit to its motion. Yet through its silence, it stirs something human, the need to find coherence in the incomprehensible. You feel the quiet kinship between faith and fact. Both begin with trust. Both can be wounded by loss. And both, somehow, keep returning. The scientists who charted 3I/Atlas know their measurements may never complete the story. But they also know that each fragment adds to something larger, an ongoing conversation with the cosmos, one that will outlive them all. You think of how faith is often described as light in darkness. In astronomy, that becomes literal. Every act of observation is an act of believing that the faintest photon matters, that what reaches a detector has meaning. Perhaps that's why astronomers work mostly at night, because night reminds them that clarity is born from patience, that light and darkness are not opposites but partners. You take a slow breath. The thoughts settle softly. In the stillness, you understand that science, too, has its emotional gravity. It moves not only through numbers, but through the fragile hearts of those who seek truth without ever touching it. The equations hold precision, but the pursuit itself holds longing. And maybe that longing, not the certainty, is what keeps discovery alive. You close your eyes and imagine the researchers again, faces lit by data screens, each one staring into a different shade of the same question. You sense the quiet bond among them, strangers connected by the shared act of wonder. Fact and faith intertwine, like twin threads in the same tapestry. One measures, the other endures. Together, they hold a fragile bridge between ignorance and insight, a bridge you cross each time you look up at the stars. You realize that to trust the universe is not to expect answers, but to remain open to whatever form they come in. Sometimes as light, sometimes as silence. Outside, the night sky waits. The visitor still travels unseen, carrying its quiet truth through the dark. The data may be incomplete, but your wonder is not. And in that wonder, a new question begins to rise, a question about the hearts that keep searching, even when the stars go silent. You sit before the stream of numbers, a quiet river of light translated into code. The telescope does not speak in sentences or symbols, only in pulses, timing, and silence. Each point of data is a whisper of something distant, arriving through distances that turn seconds into centuries. Yet in that flow, in the grain of digital noise, something stirs, a rhythm that feels deliberate, a heartbeat faintly out of place. At first, you think it's nothing. The mind wants to make order out of randomness. You've seen it before, constellations born from chaos, melodies heard in wind. But the echo repeats. You pause the stream, rewind, play it again. The pattern returns, faint but certain. A spike, a pause, another spike. It isn't supposed to be there. The team gathers, voices low, coffee cooling beside computer screens. Someone runs a statistical check. Someone else overlays models of cosmic background radiation. The signal hides among them, like a faint note inside an orchestra. If it were a human voice, it would be breathing. If it were a planet, it would be spinning. If it were random, it would have already vanished. You breathe slower, matching its rhythm. What is this sound in the silence? What is this order in the dark? Astronomy has always lived between certainty and curiosity. You don't observe stars directly. You interpret their messages. The photons are ancient travelers, carrying news that may no longer be true. Even the data that looks precise is softened by distance, smeared by time. So you learn to listen differently, not for what is said, but for what might still be hiding in the pause between words. Noise in science. is a residue of what you can't yet explain. Every detector has it: the hum of electronics, the hiss of thermal motion, the faint fingerprints of cosmic microwave background. But within that mess, sometimes something refuses to fade. In the noise hides the beginnings of discovery. You think of the first pulsars, signals dismissed as interference, then recognized as the regular beat of collapsed stars. You think of radio bursts, too fast to catch, once thought to be static, later found to come from galaxies billions of light years away. The universe doesn't shout. It murmurs. You feel that same murmur now. A line of data becomes a question. The question becomes a mirror. What if this echo, this accidental rhythm, is not an accident? You run tests through the night, subtract the background, filter the interference, model the noise. Yet the pattern survives every cut. It is almost as if the data itself resists erasure, like a dream refusing to dissolve in morning light. But there's another possibility. Perhaps the signal is a ghost of the instrument, a memory of calibration, an algorithmic residue. Even machines remember in strange ways. A deleted file is never entirely gone. It lingers in hidden clusters, in faint magnetic signatures. The telescope, too, has memory of stars it has watched, of corrections made, of errors accumulated. The echo could be nothing more than the machine dreaming of its own past. That thought comforts you and troubles you. Science thrives on humility. To listen well is to accept that what you hear might not be real. Yet deep down, every scientist carries a wish that the universe is speaking and that you might be the one to hear it first. You check the coordinates of the signal, a region near the path of 3IATLAS, the wandering visitor. Coincidence, maybe, or maybe not. You overlay the data, trace the faint path of the interstellar traveler, and the rhythm aligns, barely perceptible but rhythmic. A correspondence too quiet to claim, too suggestive to ignore. You realize the irony. To prove it, you must doubt it. So you doubt with devotion. Day by day, the analysis continues. You compare instruments across observatories. You dig through archives of past detections. You find fragments, echoes of echoes, like faint ripples spreading across time. Each pattern is similar but never identical. Something changes, evolves, or perhaps merely shifts perspective. The signal becomes a living thing. You begin to imagine its origin. Could be the signature of a magnetic field wrapping around an object unseen, or a pulsar with a pulse distorted by motion, or some natural mechanism that repeats without reason, like waves against a rock. You explore all possibilities: mechanical, statistical, astronomical, psychological. Each one explains something. None explains everything. In the quiet hours before dawn, you step outside. The air is cold, still, unmeasured. Above you, the sky seems unchanged, yet every photon that reaches you carries a different age. The light from one star left before humans spoke, another before Earth cooled, the one from 3I/Atlas, perhaps before galaxies took shape. The data feels less like numbers now, more like fossils of energy. Each contains memory. Even static has ancestry, patterns encoded by collisions of particles, by the earliest tremors of the universe itself. You realize that in every frequency, every error bar, every piece of noise, there is a story, one that began long before you looked. Perhaps that's what the echo is, the universe remembering itself. And in that remembrance, you hear something human. The rhythm reminds you of heartbeat monitors, of signals pulsing through veins. Maybe the cosmos is not silent after all. Maybe it is simply alive in a way we haven't yet learned to listen for. You return to your desk. The data still scrolls, endless. The echo still hides, refusing definition. And though you cannot name it, you begin to feel at peace with not knowing. Science, like life, moves forward not only through answers, but through the courage to remain inside the question. You save the file, though you know it will not be final. Someone else will open it one day, see the same trace, and wonder again. The echo will persist through servers, through minds, through time. It may fade or it may sharpen, but its persistence means something. Maybe the universe is teaching you how to listen, not with expectation, but with patience. Maybe the signal is less about what's out there and more about what happens when you truly pay attention. The night stretches longer and your thoughts drift. In the soft hum of computers, in the background hiss of cosmic radiation, you hear the steady, quiet truth that everything leaves a trace. Every photon, every measurement, every act of curiosity, even deleted files. And as you close your eyes, you wonder what other echoes, faint and forgotten, are waiting to be heard again. You expect a comet to shimmer, a tail stretched like a sigh of ice, a nucleus wrapped in mist. But when 3I/Atlas first appeared in the data, it refused those expectations. No bright coma, no arc of vapor trailing behind it, just a point of motion, faint, detached, disinterested in display. It moved through the field like something that didn't want to be witnessed. You watch the trajectory again. The orbit seems unstable, the brightness inconsistent. It doesn't spin like a comet should. It glides. There's no shedding of gas, no halo of dust, just a whisper of reflected sunlight, enough to suggest mass but not behavior. The telescope confirms it. 3I/Atlas is something else. Something that carries the form of a comet, but not the life of one. You imagine what that means. Comets are storytellers, relics from the earliest days of the solar system, frozen libraries of dust and water, carrying chemical scripts older than Earth. When sunlight touches them, they awaken, speak in vapor and light. But this visitor, this distant fragment of another system, keeps its story closed. It resists interpretation, as if guarding a secret that language cannot hold. Scientists call it an interstellar object. That phrase feels almost too clinical, too steady for what it represents. The truth is that 3I/Atlas was never truly ours. It entered the solar system as a stranger, moving too fast to stay, bound for no one's gravity well. It would not orbit the sun, not settle into any rhythm of belonging. It would pass through and continue, like an uninvited thought drifting across the mind. You picture it now, a small, irregular shard of something ancient, tumbling through a sea of emptiness. Maybe it's the remnant of a shattered planet, maybe the debris of a broken moon, or maybe, as some quietly speculate, an artifact of something more, something made. But the data doesn't say. The numbers remain indifferent, neither confirming nor denying, so you are left with silence. In science, silence is not emptiness. It's space for humility, the reminder that not everything that exists must explain itself. The telescope, for all its precision, captures only a fraction of reality. The rest, the invisible, the unresolved, floats just beyond reach, like stars still forming in a cloud too thick to see through. You zoom in on the recorded path of 3I/Atlas. Its motion cuts a clean, impossible arc across the sky. Unlike the familiar ellipses of comets, its line is open, hyperbolic, forever outward. That shape tells a story written in gravity. This object came from elsewhere and will never return. Its speed, its angle, its indifference to the sun, all signs of a wander between stars. Somewhere, long ago, it must have been part of another system. Perhaps it circled another star before being flung free by chance or collision. Eons passed as it drifted through interstellar night, frozen and alone. Then, by a miracle of motion, it entered ours, briefly visible, briefly measurable, before fading again into the great nowhere. You feel something tender in that thought. The idea that something so small could travel so far, untouched, unseen, unremembered, and that you, by accident of alignment, could witness its passing. A meeting between two infinities, one made of matter, the other of mind. The observatories compared notes. The data aligned but refused clarity. The object's brightness changed in ways light shouldn't. It dimmed without reason, flared without cause. Some argued that it was tumbling in a way that redirected sunlight unevenly. Others suggested that it might be reflecting light differently, not like rock or ice, but like something smoother, more deliberate. The idea felt dangerous, the possibility of design. But speculation, however tempting, dissolves quickly in the cool air of evidence. Science does not chase comfort. It courts uncertainty. You learn to walk the line between awe and restraint, to let wonder breathe without declaring truth too soon. You remember a quote you once read, Absence is a kind of presence, too. 3I/Atlas embodies that idea. Its quietness speaks louder than discovery. It forces you to look again at what it means to know. What do you do when the universe offers a sign that doesn't fit any pattern? Do you expand your theories or your patience? The sky offers no answer. Weeks pass. The object moves beyond the range of most instruments. Its faint light grows dimmer, its trail fainter. Eventually, it disappears into the noise. The data ends. The stream closes. And yet, the questions remain bright, insistent, unresolved. You replay the final images. The pixelated smear of motion feels like a goodbye. You realize how brief the encounter was. A few weeks of detection, a few months of analysis against millions of years of travel. In that scale, even curiosity feels fragile. But maybe fragility is the point. Science, at its core, is an act of tenderness toward the unknown. Every measurement is a gesture of care, every hypothesis a reaching hand. You study the faint, the fleeting, the nearly gone, not to possess them, but to understand their passing. In that, 3I/Atlas becomes more than an object. It becomes a meditation on impermanence. Perhaps that's what draws you to astronomy in the first place. Its paradoxical intimacy with distance. You spend nights looking at what you can never touch, decoding what will never speak. And yet, through numbers and light, you feel connected, part of a continuum that stretches beyond sight, beyond species, beyond time itself. 3I/Atlas, in its silence, reminds you that knowledge is not the same as understanding. You can measure speed, trajectory, and brightness. But the feeling of its journey, the ache of exile, the calm of endurance, belongs to another language entirely, one closer to poetry than physics. And maybe that's okay. Not every mystery exists to be solved. Some exist to remind you of your scale, to whisper that even in all your brilliance, you're still part of something larger, older, and quietly unknowable. You imagine the object now, far beyond Neptune's reach, moving toward the void between stars. It will cross that emptiness for another billion years, unseen again, carrying the faint trace of sunlight from its brief encounter with the system. A visitor who left no mark, but changed the way you listen. You close your eyes and picture it drifting, a piece of cosmic memory, indifferent yet enduring. Somewhere, in another distant system, another observer may one day see it and wonder the same things you do now. What was it? Where did it come from? What does its silence mean? The answers will change, but the wonder will remain the same. Science, you realize, is not a ladder to certainty. It's a song played slowly through generations, each note a question, each rests a moment of humility. And in that song, 3I/Atlas is a pause, brief, beautiful, and unresolved. Its absence becomes a mirror, reflecting the quiet truth that not all travelers wish to be seen. You notice at first not in what appears, but in what doesn't. A blank folder, a missing link, a file once visible, now gone. The record of 3I/Atlas flickers out of existence as quietly as it entered the sky. At first, you think it's a glitch. Servers fail, databases migrate. Space agencies are oceans of information, always rearranging themselves. But then others notice too. Whole sequences of early telescope captures, gone. A handful of official statements appear, calm and procedural. Data realignment, archival reorganization. The kind of words that smooth over uncertainty without answering it. And so a new story begins. When the mind cannot find closure, it writes its own. Some whisper of censorship, that NASA removed the images because they revealed something impossible. Others imagine software errors, so complex they seem intentional. Each rumor becomes a constellation, a way of connecting points of absence into meaning. You listen quietly to this chorus of speculation. The human brain, after all, is a pattern-making machine. It evolved to see faces in clouds, to sense movement in the shadows. Where information fades, imagination rushes in, not out of deceit, but out of need. In that way, disappearance has its own gravity. You think of it scientifically. In physics, absence is never truly empty. Even the void hums with background radiation, the faint residue of creation. Likewise, in data, a gap pulls attention like a mass pulling light. It distorts what surrounds it, bending perception into interpretation. The missing images become that gravity well. People post screenshots of what they think they saw. Fuzzy captures, enhanced pixels, color-boosted frames. A feint that, they say, shaped wrong, moving strangely. The discussions circle endlessly. Artifact, compression, error, proof. But as you scroll through the noise, you realize the truth doesn't live in any of these fragments. It lives in the emotion that drives them. Curiosity, fear, wonder. Every vanished file becomes a story seed. Some imagine the object as an alien probe, scanning solar winds. Others call it a failed transmission from an ancient civilization. A few, more poetic than precise, describe it as a cosmic ghost, the memory of a world that burned out before ours began. You don't dismiss them entirely. Imagination, too, is a scientific instrument, not for proof, but for possibility. Every great discovery begins as a whisper of doubt, a flicker of wonder. Even the most rational minds begin by saying, "What if?" Still, you can't ignore the human need for certainty. In the silence of missing data, the imagination becomes both savior and saboteur. It keeps the night alive with meaning, but also breeds distrust. One person's awe is another's accusation. You open a different kind of archive, the one inside yourself. You think about how memory works. The brain, like NASA servers, deletes and rewrites constantly. Each recollection is not a perfect file, but a reconstruction, rebuilt every time you recall it. Some details fade, others distort. And yet, the feeling, the weight of significance, remains. Perhaps, you think, the universe itself remembers this way, imperfectly, selectively, beautifully incomplete. In the dark, you imagine what those lost images might have shown. Maybe nothing remarkable, just faint light, noise, coincidence. Or maybe something subtle, easily dismissed, an angle that didn't fit predictions, a glint that refused explanation. Whatever it was, its absence now means more than its presence ever could have. That's the paradox of disappearance. Once something vanishes, it becomes more powerful than it ever was. You recall the physicist saying, "The map is not the territory." But what if the map begins to erase itself? What does that do to the traveler's faith and direction? You close your eyes and see the sky again. Not the visible one, but the invisible lattice of data connecting every telescope on Earth. Streams of photons turn to numbers, numbers to meaning, meaning to story. Somewhere in that network, a handful of bits failed to survive the translation. They fell into the gaps between systems, lost or maybe hidden. And in that loss, the story of 3IATLAS changed forever. It is no longer just an object, it is an event, a disappearance, observed and magnified by human emotion. Like a star collapsing, the truth has become denser, smaller, and infinitely harder to see. But perhaps that's what the cosmos does best. It teaches you to look into absence until you find reflection. You think of black holes, not as monsters, but as mirrors. They consume light, yes, but in doing so they shape galaxies. Their invisibility is not emptiness, it's influence. Maybe these vanished files are like that, invisible centers around which curiosity orbits. In a way, that's how science survives. Not on the certainties it possesses, but on the questions it can't yet let go of. And you, sitting beneath the quiet hum of your own thoughts, are part of that same experiment. You are learning to live with partial answers. You are learning that sometimes mystery itself is the method. Still, you feel something gentle inside the unease. A recognition that the missing images, the deleted data, the fragment of conversation, they all mirror a deeper human truth. You, too, are a collection of absences, memories misplaced, stories rewritten, moments lost in time. And yet, like the scientist searching the sky, you continue to observe, to infer, to wonder. Maybe that's a hidden kinship between people and the universe. Both are defined as much by what they've lost as by what remains. You imagine 3I/Atlas again, not as an object, but as a message written in erasure. Its trajectory, its silence, its missing data, all parts of the same sentence. You try to read it, knowing the last words are gone, knowing you'll never be sure what it meant. And yet, you read it anyway, because disappearance is not the end of knowing. It's the beginning of listening differently. Perhaps the next pattern won't come from brightness or shape, but from what lies beneath the visible. In the echoes, the background hum, the faint statistical tremor of something unaccounted for. You wonder if that's how the universe speaks. Not through the obvious, but through the spaces between signals. Silence, after all, is not the absence of sound. It is the pause that gives sound its shape. The missing images are not evidence of deceit or divinity. They are the punctuation marks in an unfinished conversation between mind and cosmos. You breathe. You let the thoughts settle. You understand now that the missing is not failure, it's invitation. And as the night folds itself around your quiet thoughts, you feel the pull of what comes next, the search for meaning within the static itself. You close your eyes and imagine the solar system not as a diagram, but as an orchestra. Every planet, moon, and wandering body vibrates with a hidden note, a music made not of air, but of gravity. You cannot hear in the way you hear wind or water, but you can sense it, as the space itself hums in a slow, eternal rhythm. The sun holds the deep bass line. It is the center of the score, anchoring the melody of motion. Each planet moves in orbit like a string being gently plucked. Mercury's tone is sharp and high, a restless flicker of motion. Venus sings lower, steady and serene. Earth hums softly, a comfortable middle note that feels familiar to your bones. Mars adds its faint echo, a bit dusty, a bit raw. Then beyond, the outer planets stretch the song, deep, slow, enormous. Jupiter's gravity rumbles like a drum, while Saturn resonates like a bell wrapped in mist. And through it all, the sun listens, not as a conductor, but as part of the same infinite music. You begin to realize that orbits are not just paths in space. They are dances. When a body moves around another, it enters a relationship of rhythm, a gravitational duet. Newton described it as attraction. Kepler turned it into geometry. Einstein reimagined it as curvature. But you can feel it as something more ancient, something like sound endlessly looping, always in tune with unseen harmony. Every body in motion alters the whole. Each orbit bends a silence slightly. That is why, when 3IATLAS appeared, astronomers listened. They didn't use their ears, of course. They used radio waves, telescopes tuned to infrared and visible light. Yet beneath the data, there was the same instinct. To hear the pattern, to feel where it fits and where it doesn't. At first, 3I/Atlas was only a faint, fast-moving point. Too small to notice unless you knew what to look for. But as it crossed the lens, something about its motion felt offbeat. It did not move in the rhythm of our solar system. Its orbit didn't belong. It was an improvisation from another song, played by a traveler that didn't know our tempo. You imagine it entering from the dark, like a note from a distant instrument drifting through a foggy hall. Not loud, not even distinct, but undeniable. Its frequency was just slightly different. The angle of its movement, the brightness of its reflection, the curve of its trajectory, all told a story. And that story said, I am passing through. Astronomers compared it to interstellar objects before it, Oumuamua, Borisov, each one a rare visitor, not bound by the sun. They called such travelers messengers, fragments from other systems that slipped through ours by cosmic chance. They follow no gravitational rulebook here. They are guests, singing a single verse before vanishing again. But this one, 3I/Atlas, had a tone that lingered. Its pattern wasn't random. When scientists mapped its brightness over time, they found subtle oscillations like a flickering heartbeat. Something was rotating, something irregular, perhaps a tumbling fragment of ice and dust. Perhaps something more structured, shaped by forces unknown. You feel how easily mystery grows from sound. Some called it natural, a remnant of a long-lost comet ejected from its birth star. Others whispered theories that drifted closer to wonder. Could it be artificial? Could an ancient civilization have sent it long ago, a relic drifting endlessly between stars? The human mind, after all, fills silence with story. We are drawn to meaning like moths to light. But what matters most, perhaps, is not the answer, it's the listening itself. When you listen deeply, without trying to decide too soon, you begin to hear subtler patterns. The tone of uncertainty, the rhythm of curiosity, the quiet music of not knowing yet, the data turned into graphs, and the graphs into speculation. But underneath, something more delicate was unfolding, an emotional resonance between humans and the cosmos. Every discovery, every anomaly, is like a new chord added to the song of understanding. You imagine standing in a field at night, the sky spread above you like a sheet of dark silk, each star a single, shining note. You close your eyes and try to hear them as one, a choir older than Earth. Somewhere within that hum, 3IATLAS adds its brief melody. The sound is faint, nearly nothing, but it changes everything. Because motion, even fleeting motion, is never meaningless. It alters the gravitational harmony of the whole. When 3I/Atlas passes, the orbits of planets shift ever so slightly. A tug invisible to the senses, but written into the cosmic fabric. And perhaps, you think, the same is true for knowledge. Every new idea, every mysterious visitor, pulls at the orbit of our certainty. It changes the shape of how we see. Astronomers speak of resonance, the way orbits synchronize when their period align in simple ratios. Two planets can share a rhythm, their gravitational dances locked in balance. Jupiter and its moons perform such symphonies endlessly. But resonance isn't only a physical phenomenon. It's also emotional. When you sense wonder, you resonate with the universe itself. You fall into a kind of harmony with what you do not yet understand. You picture 3I/Atlas again, small, cold, reflecting sunlight from another world. It doesn't know it's being watched. It doesn't know it's part of any story. It simply moves, carried by forces older than stars. And yet in its movement, it gives you a song to follow. The scientists map its path precisely, through the constellations past Jupiter's domain, curving gently toward the outer dark. They estimate when it will vanish from view. Soon, it will fade beyond the reach of telescopes, its light swallowed by distance. But before it goes, it leaves a trace, not in the sky, but in our minds, a shift in the collective melody of curiosity. You realize that listening to the universe is never a passive act. To listen is to participate. The observer, by paying attention, becomes part of the pattern. When you attend to the faintest whisper, the nearly inaudible tone of an interstellar traveler, you alter your own orbit of thought. You become more attuned to the quiet between things, to the gravity that binds ideas together. Some nights, you imagine what would sound like if we could truly translate motion into music. Jupiter's deep resonance, Earth's gentle oscillation, the tiny trembling of moons. Would it sound like harmony or chaos? Would there be rhythm or endless drift? Perhaps both. Perhaps the beauty lies in the tension between order and chance, between the steady drum of orbital physics and the improvisation of what enters from beyond. Like jazz, the cosmos plays with expectation. It invites surprise into its score. 3I/Atlas, then, is a brief solo, a high, haunting note that appears once and never again. Its music is a sound of impermanence, of motion that cannot be repeated. But its echo lingers in your thoughts, long after the sound itself is gone. You realize that maybe this is how the universe speaks, not in words, but in moments of resonance. In fleeting alignments between mind and matter, the night feels larger now. The silence is full, not empty. You sense the music of orbits not as something far away, but as something you belong to, the rhythm of breath, the pulse of your heart, the turning of the earth beneath you, all of it part of the same ancient score. And as 3I/Atlas slips toward the edge of vision, you listen once more. There it is, faint, pure, diminishing, the sound of a world you will never visit, singing farewell as it disappears into the black, a sound that reminds you how every ending is just another beginning, another measure in the endless music of motion. And somewhere in that vanishing tone, you feel the next question forming, soft and inevitable. What happens when the song goes silent? You sit before a glowing screen, its surface filled with numbers, images, and motion, fragments of a universe caught in light. Rows of data stretch into infinity. Measurements of dust tails, reflected wavelengths, orbital angles, decay curves. The digital archive feels endless, yet you know it isn't. Every byte here is borrowed space. Every piece of stored knowledge competes with something that must be forgotten. In science, as in memory, keeping is an act of choice. You imagine the quiet hum of the observatory servers, the deep, patient machines that hold the sky in their circuits. But even they have limits. For every image of 3I/Atlas saved, 100 others are discarded. Blurry frames, calibration errors, background noise. Not because they lack meaning, but because meaning must be weighed. Scientists keep what fits the story, what clarifies the signal. The rest dissolves into silence, erased not by cruelty, but by necessity. And so the universe begins to resemble the human mind. Memory is not a full recording. It's a selection. You remember the brightness of a moment, the shape of a voice, but not the air pressure, the angle of light, the count of seconds passing. Your mind edits as it keeps. It chooses continuity over totality. You're always both an archivist and an eraser. In the same way, astronomers choose which moments of the cosmos will endure. Each observation of 3I/Atlas comes with noise, the faint hiss of cosmic background radiation, the pulse of solar wind, the electrical static of instruments. In that noise might lie subtle truths, a wobble, a flicker, a faint shift in color. But there isn't room to hold everything. And so, choices are made. You wonder how many secrets have vanished in the simple act of saving space. The scientists are not careless. They are careful. They store what they deem essential. But what if the essential changes? What if, in a decade, someone realizes the deleted data contained a clue, the fragment of a signal misread, the whisper of something new? The thought feels haunting, like realizing a memory you let go might have held an answer you now need. You picture the archive as a living organism, breathing in and out, inhaling knowledge, exhaling loss. Deletion is not destruction, only transformation. When something is erased, its memory lingers faintly, magnetized ghosts on a hard drive, traces in circuitry, background imprints in cosmic radiation. The cosmos keeps nothing and everything at once. For every file deleted, the photons that once created it still travel, unbothered by human boundaries. Light never forgets. It just moves on. Even if no one records it, it still sings across space, its message preserved in motion. The stars archive themselves in the fabric of space-time, indifferent to whether we listen. You think about how different that is from human knowing. We crave permanence, to name, to file, to record. Yet even our greatest archives are small next time. Libraries burn. Drives fail. Clouds lose their contents. What survives is never the full picture, only what resonated, what someone cared enough to keep. In this way, science mirrors emotion. You keep certain memories not because they're most accurate, but because they're most alive. Maybe that's what data curation really is, an emotional act disguised as logic. The astronomer who decides to keep a frame does so not only for its clarity, but because it feels like it might mean something. The decision contains a quiet pulse of wonder. And so, even deletion becomes a gesture of faith. To erase is to believe you'll see again, or that what's lost is no longer needed. You look at the logs of 3I/Atlas. Its brightness slowly fading, its path slipping outward. Soon, it will fall below the sensitivity threshold of the telescopes. When that happens, new data will stop flowing. The servers will grow quieter. Someone will archive the final sequence, mark the file complete, and move on to the next object. Another fragment added to the record of the vanishing. You realize this rhythm of gathering and letting go echoes in every layer of the cosmos. Stars burn, release energy, and fade. Planets lose atmospheres. Galaxies shed light into nothing. Everything that exists also erases itself, gradually and beautifully. What remains is the pattern, not the material. Even the atoms in your body are records, memories of older stars, preserved in structure. Carbon, oxygen, calcium, all forged in furnaces that no longer burn. You are made of what the universe decided to keep. And in that thought, there is comfort, because maybe it's all right that not everything is saved. If every detail remained, there would be no rhythm, no renewal. The night sky would be a static image, not a living motion. The mind would be a cluttered archive, not a breathing field. Erasure, then, is not loss. It's a kind of editing that allows new stories to form. You imagine how scientists compress their findings, condensing terabytes into elegant graphs, turning raw data into patterns. In doing so, they translate noise into meaning. They erase complexity to reveal truth. Just as a sculptor removes stone to reveal a face, the researcher deletes to reveal understanding. Yet even this has its cost. Every simplification hides something, a detail, a deviation, an outlier. Sometimes what we erase returns. Decades later, someone re-examines old data, an overlooked anomaly, a forgotten reading. A new algorithm finds what human eyes missed. Suddenly, what was noise becomes signal. What was discarded becomes essential. The cosmos, patient and infinite, allows us to rediscover what we once let go. You think of your own forgotten moments, the ones you believed were lost, the memories that return uninvited, glowing faintly in dream. Perhaps the universe works like this too. Nothing truly vanishes. It just waits for the right kind of attention to be seen again. As you sit in the dim light, the hum of machines becomes a lullaby. Somewhere in the observatory, the data logs continue to record. Photons striking sensors, faint signals from distant dust. You know that every bit will one day fade. Every record will one day corrupt. And yet, for now, it is enough that they exist. Science, after all, is a dialogue between presence and absence. Each discovery says, "Here's what we found." Each deletion whispers, "Here's what we let go." And between the two lies understanding, the quiet balance between knowing and forgetting. You realize that perhaps the truest form of preservation is not the file or the number, but the transformation that happens in the mind of the listener. The image becomes memory. The data becomes imagination. Even when the archive is gone, the wonder remains. You close your eyes and imagine 3IATLAS fading into distance, its final photon still rushing toward someone. Somewhere, who will one day look up and wonder what once passed this way. The universe has no need to store or delete. It simply continues, infinite and indifferent. But we, bound by time, must choose. What we erase defines the silence. What we keep defines the song. And as you listen to that fragile music, you sense a question forming in the quiet beyond. What happens to the things we lose before we ever notice they were there? You sit outside, under a sky that has outlived every question ever asked of it. The stars shimmer as if they, too, are thinking long, slow thoughts that span across centuries. The world is still. The observatories are quiet now, their domes sealed for the night. Somewhere in that silence, 3I/Atlas continues its journey, a silent travel receding into invisibility, carried with it the last echoes of attention. You close your eyes and breathe in the cool air, the kind that feels like the edge of space. It carries a strange calm, a blend of ending and beginning. The investigation is finished. The data has been parsed. The debates archived. Yet what lingers most is not certainty, but wonder. Science often begins in noise and ends in quiet. You think about how much effort was poured into the search. How many sleepless nights were spent decoding fragments of light. How many theories rose and fell like tides. All for a glimpse, a pattern, a confirmation that would bring order to the unknown. But sometimes the unknown stays where it is, untamed and luminous. And maybe that's the point. You imagine 3I/Atlas as a question written in motion, its orbit like a sentence that refuses to end with a period. It passed through the inner solar system, broke every model of expectation, and then left unbothered by the conclusions drawn in its wake. It carried no message, only its silence. The universe doesn't speak in answers. It speaks in continuations. Every photon we catch is only a fragment of a longer sentence. Every measurement, a word in an unfinished paragraph. To listen deeply is to accept incompletion, to trust that meaning often lies not in the solved, but in the still unsolved. You think about how children ask questions before they fall asleep. Why is the sky dark? Why do stars shine? Where does light go when it dies? These are not just curiosities. They are lullabies disguised as wonder. The human mind, even at rest, longs to stretch beyond itself, to find something vast enough to cradle it. Perhaps the night sky is that cradle. You remember the early days of the 3IATLAS story. The first discovery notices, the press releases, the cautious excitement of scientists wondering what it might be. Was it a comet? An asteroid? Something older, stranger, born from another star system entirely? Each hypothesis was like a hand reaching toward the dark. Each observation added clarity, yet also deepened the mystery. Even when the data grew precise, the feeling of uncertainty remained. Because knowledge never eliminates mystery, it only refines its shape. You think of how light behaves, a particle, a wave, something that defies the categories we make for it. Its dual nature is not a flaw of our understanding, but a reflection of our limits. The universe allows itself to be seen only in partial truths, as if to remind us that complete knowing is an illusion. And so it is with 3I/Atlas. You learn what you could, its trajectory, its speed, its strange quiet. But its story is unfinished, because it was never meant to belong entirely to us. It passed through our awareness like a dream that leaves only the faintest impression on waking, vivid, but just beyond reach. You open your eyes. The stars seem sharper now, as if focusing on you in return. You wonder if curiosity itself is a kind of gravity, a pull between mind and cosmos, thought and distance. You are drawn upward endlessly, even when you know you can never arrive. In that realization, something softens. You begin to understand that the purpose of science is not to replace wonder, but to protect it, to keep it alive through attention and care. Each equation, each measurement, is a small prayer for continuity. To ask why is to stay awake inside the vastness. You remember a quote once written on a chalkboard in the observatory. In every experiment, the universe answers, but not always to the question we asked. You smile at the truth of it. Perhaps 3I/Atlas was not a revelation, but a reminder, a whisper from the deep sky that certainty is not the goal, curiosity is. That even when files vanish or signals fade or instruments fall silent, the search remains sacred. The scientists will move on to other data, other mysteries. But for you, something about this moment stays. You imagine that faint object still moving beyond the sun's reach, out toward the quiet between stars. You picture it passing unseen worlds, untouched clouds of dust, forgotten fields of ancient light. Somewhere out there, it becomes indistinguishable from the background, folded into the larger song. You find peace in that image, because maybe what disappears is not lost, but joined with everything else that waits beyond sight. You think about how questions have their own kind of orbit. They leave you, circle around years of thought, and then return in another form. Sometimes they come back as art, sometimes as silence, sometimes as awe. The act of wondering never really ends. It only changes shape. In the hush of the night, you feel that truth settling into you like starlight, faint, slow, constant. You realize that every unanswered question adds depth to the cosmos inside you. Without mystery, the mind would flatten. Without unknowing, there will be no direction to dream toward. So you let go. You let the unanswered rest. Above you, the stars are already writing their next questions, carried on waves of light that will take billions of years to arrive. Somewhere, someone will one day receive them and wonder anew. It comforts you to know that curiosity is infinite, passed like a torch from one generation to the next. Science, you think, is less a map and more a melody. Each discovery adds a note, but the song never ends. Its pauses are as vital as it sounds. In the rests, the quiet moments between, we hear ourselves reflected back. 3I/Atlas was one of those rests, a silence in the symphony. And perhaps that's why it mattered so much, because it reminded us that even in absence, there is presence. Even in uncertainty, there is meaning. You take one last look at the sky. The constellations seem to hum faintly, like a heartbeat too slow to notice but too steady to ignore. You feel the night folding around you, immense, invisible, infinite. The mystery remains untouched. You think of how every question is also a promise, a way of saying, I will keep looking. And so, You whisper one final thought into the air, unsure who it's for. Maybe the universe asks, too. The stars shimmer, as if replying. In their quiet language of light, you feel both the question and its echo. And somewhere, beyond sight and measure, 3i/Atlas continues to move. Not toward an answer, but toward another beginning.